Okay, so now that we've talked about the difference between the speed graph and the value graph, and we've blocked out the timing of our animation, the next thing we need to do is refine our piece and kind of bring everything together. So one thing that I kind of talked about in the walk around and I talked about in the recorded demo, but I guess I didn't cover in class, is the use of a null to store the animation. Therefore, you can have, for example, in my piece here, the ball starts going in back of the stairs, and then once it gets pushed to the foreground, it goes to the front. All right, and how the null lets you do that. The other thing that the null is going to let us do, though, that's really pertinent to the whole relationship between the speed and the value graph, is it's going to let us kind of pick which approach we want for each section. So what I said in the demos is the speed graph is nice when the movement's moving along a path, kind of like the bowl of this ampersand here. And the value graph is good when the two axes of x and y need to behave differently, like a ball bounce. Like the y accelerates and decelerates, but the x is a little bit more constant. So what we can do in After Effects is we can use nulls to kind of break down our animation into pieces where we can use the right graph for each. Okay, so I'm going to end this piece right here because the ball is off stage, and that just lets me keep the real estate a little better. I'm gonna maybe hide some stuff so I have a little more room to work. And then I'm gonna break this into pieces. All right, so let's see. The first breakpoint is right where it drops. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go Command Shift D, and that put it into two pieces. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these keyframes and delete them, and all those keyframes and delete them. And I'm going to have this first part be a child of the second part. And so what should happen is it should be exactly the same, but now I have two different sets of keyframes. So let's just double check to make sure I haven't broken anything. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing again right over here. So basically, well, let me just do it. So Control Shift D. I'm going to delete all of those. Go over here. Delete all these. And then I'm going to have this be a child of that. And you're like, oh my gosh, you just made it so much more complicated. But the thing that's cool about this setup is I can go over here now, once again, and this can be the value graph, this can be the value graph, and this can be the speed graph. I'm using helper nulls. And watch, we can watch it just all happen. Or this, to that, to that. All right. And can really visualize it if I just do this. So this meets that null, then that one takes over, then it goes to the end, and then that one takes over. All right. All right. So the first section is going to be this door thing here. Is going to rotate up and set it in motion, and then it's going to have a little ball bounce sequence. Okay, so to turn this from the speed graph into the value graph, I'm selecting my position, and I'm going to click Separate Dimensions. All right. So let's see what we have here. What I want to do first is eliminate any X keyframes where the ball is in the air, because it's not actually, I mean, I guess it would have like air resistance, I suppose, but it's not actually interacting with anything. It only interacts with the ground on these bounces. So what that means is that can go, that can go, that can go. I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make all these keyframes linear. Once again, I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just looking at this. If anything, it's going to decelerate a little bit. So the slope is going to slowly decrease with each bounce. All right. Now the other thing that needs to happen in the X is it's going to roll in and then stop and then get sprung into action. So I'm going to do this, roll in and stop, and then the spring into action is going to accelerate very, very quickly. So let's see how this is going. All right. All right, the other thing that I want to have happen is I want it to come almost completely to a stop. I think actually this whole section here can be a deceleration. All right, not too bad. Okay, so the other thing that needs to happen, watch watch this one more time, is each one of these y's should be a parabola. And this also needs to come from a rest up to speed very quickly. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab the y's. And then these, and I need to break these handles, and the way you do that is you just Alt. Drag on them. Whoopsie. All right. So just kind of play back the section I'm interested in. The other thing we might want to do, now that we're at it, is just double check our contact points. That looks good. All right, so each one of these, just double check that they're the same. 0.5, 0.5. See, I think this one's a little off. Oh, I guess this is the same. All right. Funny, it looks different, but I guess it's the same. Oh, because I'm in a different format in time. So what should happen with the snap, should line them up. All right. All right, not too bad. I'm gonna have it not quite come up so high. The other thing we want to start taking a look at now is our secondary animants, because that's going to kind of affect how we feel about how this movement is. So I'm going to get this paddle going. So let's do that. It's going to happen right here. So we're going to unlock paddle. Paddle, paddle highlight, paddle shadow. I'm going to make the shadow be a child of the paddle, and the highlight be a child of the paddle. And where is the pivot point? Yeah, it's not too bad actually. It can also be helpful to have your grid, if you built your piece with the grid, to have the grid in After Effects match it. And then it's easy to get any kind of key pivot point exactly where it needs to be. All right, so my paddle is going to spin, right? And it's going to start right here. And it's going to hit its peak over here somewhere. And then slowly come back. 0. All right, and then what else is weird? I'm just going to move this stuff up in the stack. All right, and then this should probably ease out, ease back in. All right, cool. All right, so next section is going to be the other graph. All right, so for that, I don't need to separate the dimensions. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lock these two for now. Turn on my shy. Shyness here. Look at this next section. All right, so for this part, what I want is for it to hit peak speed. So it's going to start it's going to start slow, really slow, accelerate and hit peak speed right here, and decelerate a little bit coming to here. Okay, all these other keyframes are just for position. So what that means is this and these I'm going to turn into rove across time keyframes. And what that's going to let me do is this keyframe is going to let me handle the acceleration. This will be peak velocity, and then that will be deceleration. All right, so let's dive into this. All right, so it's going to start at almost 0. This is going to be an auto Bezier. It's going to be a smooth moment. And then it's going to decelerate a little bit over here. This needs to be faster. This. Yeah, not too bad. All right. And then for the last section, it's going to be another ball bounce. All right. And for that last ball bounce, go over here, unlock that one, zoom in over here, set this. All right, so this last section will be very similar to a ball bounce, and therefore I'm going to use the value graph. All right, so let's see here. First thing I want to do, separate the channels. Then I'm going to look at my x's and nuke keyframes when the ball is in the air. And then try making them all linear for now. All right. Then we look at the y's, and we want our parabolas. This, 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 and this are all the apexes. And then that, that, and that. The hits. All right, let's see how that's going. Pretty easy actually. So the takeaway is, know which graph to use for what, and basically if the movement in x and y is linked, the interpolation is linked, use the speed graph. If x and y need to behave differently, you use the value graph. And then you want to time out your animation as well as you can, because it just saves you so much work down the line. All right. And yeah, we could keep going. I could animate this little thing popping out here, and that would be cool. But that's enough.